in the past for a couple of these ornaments, I've really struggled to try and find an ornament that I thought I could do during this this session and stuff. And this year I had looked through an awful lot of different YouTubes and everything to try and get an ornament, but all of a sudden this thing came to me. And part of it is, if you remember the last time I was here, the piece that the demonstrator didn't like was that the urchin bowl with all the spikes. Well, I got pretty comfortable turning spikes because that had 1,000 of them. So what I decided to start doing was, why don't I do something with spikes? And so you can make a little star. Now, and this is not solid. All right. One of the things I always have in mind when I'm trying to make an ornament is keep it light as possible. So I try and use light woods. So what you'll see is mainly cherry and some maple. I won't be using oak and stuff like that. But what happened to me as I was doing this is thinking about the tremendous variety of things you can do with this concept. Okay? So this is a 5-pointed star, contrasting colors, textured, what I call this the hubcap. All right, textured hubcap. All right, so then I thought, okay, if I can do 5, I can do 10. But there's going to be math tonight. Sorry, but it's just the way it is. So if I'm going to do 10, all right, the hub has to be bigger in order to do all of that. And again, this is one with a hubcap. So, you know, I had to make the hub bigger, the hubcap bigger, and all of that. But then I thought, okay, I can add a little color. I can do a hubcap where now I just do a little insert that's a little fatter than the hubcap is. So when you think about it, there's a million things you can do. And I have some example that maybe I'll put one together here. All right? Why I say math is involved.
Yeah, I think we can. Yeah. We used to also turn those and they had over the hubcap.
Everybody remember that?
No.
C equals pi d.
No.
Circumference is pi times its diameter.
Pi times the diameter. Why is the circumference and diameter important? All the spikes are 1/2 inch diameter. All right? If I want 10 of them to nestle up against each other around a hub, I have to know how big to make this hub so that 10 1/2 inches will fit around. All right? So that's the part that I need to figure out the circumference. So if I have 10 and these are 1/2 inch, that's 5 inches. All right? So 5 inches divided by pi tells me the diameter of the hub. All right? That's if I want them to touch. If I want a little space in between, all right, then I got to add a little to it. So now it's not 5 inches, maybe it's 6 inches divided by pi. So now I'm getting closer to 1.5 inches or 1 5/8, something like that. But it's just, you don't want to go through all this effort and making all of these spikes and then not be able to fit them around the hub and have to start all over with a new hub. So this is the only one you need to do. C equals pi d. You need the circumference to work out, based on the number of spikes you do, what that circumference is. That circumference then tells you the diameter of the hub. All right?
If you say.
Yeah. So, the first thing I'm going to do is bake the hub. And as most of you know, I do a lot of spindle turning and I do a lot of smaller spindle turning. So I use these jaws a lot. All right. So you may not have step jaws or spigot jaws, but I use this kind a lot. So you're going to take a piece of wood in there. I will say one thing that's also good to do is, you know, it's tough to do this with a 12-inch tool rest. So that's all pretty straightforward here, you know. Well, that's pretty good. So I've set this to a diameter that I think, the other thing that you have to be concerned about when you make the hub has to have enough robustness that I'm going to drill into here, all right, to put the tenons for the spikes. I'm doing these very short, all right, so the tenons are really quite short, so that they don't, if I did them deeper or the tenons longer and I had to drill this bigger, what you'd end up doing is have the spike of the brad point drill coming through. I can't really do them solid because I can do the front side great. Doing the back side is more complicated because how do I hold the back side without marking it up to do all the sanding and whatever I need to do on the back side. So I'm always going to drill a hole, and I'll show you how I deal with that. So this has to be robust enough. So if this is an inch, which is pretty much what I did, all of them are maybe an inch and an eighth for the smaller ones, smaller ornaments. I want this at least 1/4 of an inch or maybe 5/16. So in this case, I know I'm using a 1/2 inch Forstner bit to go through there. And that'll give me a 1/4 inch wall on both ends, all right? I may want to make, if I'm using a wood that's maybe a little bit more brittle, or you got to use a reasonable wood. You can't really use punky wood because this will just, if you've got this many holes cut in it, that's problematic. The other thing that I was doing on one of these too is that actually what I was doing was making these long enough, drilling that hole and making them long enough to extend into here, and then I was going to drill out the whole thing, and then I'd have a series of dots on the inside. But you think about this, if I'm spaced this far apart out here, because I'm going in, this diameter is smaller, I'm almost touching in there. So I'm really, the integrity of that wood has to be pretty good. So this is holly, I think. I also used a hard maple for the hub. All right, I tried some out of some spalted sweet gum, and it just kind of disintegrated. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get myself a pretty even surface. All right. I do have another tricky tool here that can also help me with the diameter. This is a little small. In fact, let me go back there. Muscle memory's a bitch. And this used to be my lathe, or I had a lathe very similar to this. So I'm going to part this off because I want to get a bigger diameter than this one down here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get that nub out of the center. And the reason I'm doing this is I just want to, I'm going to take this down a little bit so I can that fit over. And I'll show you why in a minute. In fact, yeah, so it's not much. Yeah, that'll work. And so I make this about a ½ inch. And I'm going to mark, it's arbitrary, all right? I can make this wider. I could actually make this step. There's a number of different things I can do. So if I say that's a ½ inch, I'm going to mark the center. And then to give me a little more positive reinforcement of where that is, I'm just going to go ahead and mark with my skew, make a little cut in that center point. All right, I'm going to sand the front. All right, and now there's 2 steps I can do now. One of them is I can, and that's how I did a number of these to start, and that's I marked it all out and I did the drilling of these holes on the drill press. And so just swivel around. I'm not going to do that, but I want to show you. Okay. But what I do on my table, on my drill press table, is I take a piece of wood like this and clamp it to the table. All right? So that when this comes down, I cut off this hub, so I have the hub, all right? I have it marked to where I want to cut, and I just hold it against here and just slowly bring this down and make the cut. Turn it to the next slot and move, all right? And that's how I do it all the way around. That gets me a couple of things. One, it's slow. I got my drill press set up at a slow speed. You know that the drill is going to come down vertical, so I don't have to worry about whether they're going to tilt to the front or to the back. And what I can do, that's by resting it against here, and then what I can do is just, when I'm doing this, make sure that the drill, when I put the hub on here, that it's lined up so that the drill's going towards the center. All right, and that keeps me from cocking it from one side to another. And that works pretty good. And I was happy with those results, but I didn't think I was going to be able to do it here. This is a pretty common situation when you go to drill the hub, because you got end grain and side grain. All right? And if I use a brad point drill, if I forget that I'm going into the end grain and I'm pushing a little too hard, it cracks for sure. I did a bunch of them. Or if I did them and then a day later came back to it, forgot that I have to be really gentle. All right? And I set the stop on the drill press that it goes in just as deep as I want the tenon, no more. All right? So what I'm going to do here, however, is I'm going to do the drilling on the lathe. So what's one of the things you need to do? If I'm doing it off of the lathe, I end up with a ring like this, okay? Ring like this. You end up with a hub like this when you part it off. And now you've got to mark the segments on it. So what I do is I just went online and Googled octagonal drawings, I think, pentagonal drawings, hexagonal. You know, so you just pull these off, all right, print them out. I set them on a table. I set this down on top. I line up, I put the hub so it is right in the center, you know. All right. And then I'm just going around the top and doing, and I'll work my way around. And then that I'll transfer the mark from the side to the center. You can already see there was that score mark that I used before, and I know right where that is. And I'll take my automatic punch and I'll just make a mark, and so now I'm set for drilling. This is what I would have taken over to the drill press, okay, and drilled it. And this is where, you know, geez, this is where I said, oh, I do 5, but it happens to have 10 markings, so why don't I do the next one 10? You know, here's one that's 8, but it's got 16. I decided not to do a 16-pointer star. And what I ended up with is I liked 8. I liked 8 stars around for the size hub I was doing, the size spikes I was doing. But man, the flexibility here. You can make these thinner spikes, fatter spikes, longer spikes, shorter spikes, whatever you want, and just adjust the hub appropriately, okay? So, on here though, how do I transfer it from that drawing onto here? I tried, but I'm telling you, it doesn't work real well. So what I did is I set this down, I made a ring bigger diameter, did that, put the marks on this, and there I go. So now I have the marks right where I need them. Okay, and so there I am. Now, I'm pretty happy with that. Now I need to do my my punch and go around. See that, having that groove in there really helps because it puts me right where I need to be between the two edges. Go. All right. Now, do any of you have a drill master? You know what that is? Fits in the post. It's a big assembly. it's got, you mount a portable or a drill on an electric drill. You mount it all in. It's got a lever. Shh. Too much. Too much. Indexing too much. You know, yes, I'm doing 8. Most lathes nowadays are 24, so I would have to do every third. I find that these lines are a little bit just easier. The issue now, though, what I have on the drill press is I don't have here is I have a depth stop, right, on the drill press. How do I control how deep I drill this, because I don't want to go through? I can't control the depth. If I take a piece of wood and drill the hole through it, I can control how much of that sticks out at the end. And I can adjust that by moving the drill in and out. All right? So now, what I need to do is get that, the point of the brad point in. And I'm aiming this thing towards the center. No, it slipped. No, it didn't. You gotta go in deeper. Yeah, I'm gonna make it come out a little bit more. So I just bring out the drill a little bit more. And again, I haven't drilled it out yet, okay? This gives me less chance of splitting out as I'm drilling. And by the way, this is exactly how I did all the holes for the urchin bowl. And what I did, I adjusted the diameter of this. So I set that next to 2 spikes that were in there and then drilled it, set that spike and then so it gave me the distance apart I needed for that. All right, so there I am. See if I can knock anything else down right now. I want to just give myself a little reference to where the edge of the hub is. And I want to sand it. Okay. So now I want to come up and drill out the center. Okay. So now I can go and sand in here a little bit. And if you're going to put hubcaps on, don't bother, you know. All right, and then okay, and then I'll just turn off the hub. All right, so here I am with a hub that you can see all those holes have been drilled, and I got two that kind of got close together, but I also have this side as rough. This is the side I just parted off. So how am I going to fix that? So that's another one of the things that woodworking, wood turning is all about. Is how do I hold that damn thing on the lathe? Oh, good. All right. So all I make is a little stub tenon. Oh. I gotta make that a little bigger. All right. You obviously don't want to jam that on. All right. So there I am with the other side. I can sand the inside a little bit. And there's my hub done. All right. So now I'm ready to go. And I got to turn my spikes. So I've standardized all my spikes at 1/2 inch. So one of the things when I'm doing this, I don't put these over here before they fall down. One of the things that I like to do to save some time and some wood, all right, is I like to turn multiples. And we were talking, who was I talking to about that before? Yeah. And that where I can turn a number of things without having to rechuck. So since I'm going to be turning it a spike, and with a point on this end, I can't use any tailstock support. I could for this bit right now, but I found that with this chuck, with this buried this deep, a 6.5 inch piece of wood stuck out this far, I can generally turn without an excessive amount of vibration out here. If you get too much vibration on the piece of wood you're using or whatever, you turn 2 instead of 3. All right. I usually turn this somewhere over 2,000 usually, but I'll do it 1,300 tonight. Yes, cherry. So this is a little bigger than a 1/2 inch, but I'm going to use a 1/2 inch wrench as my, not much. And this will give you some witness marks down. Once I get that close, it's a skew usually, and it's just a right, and you know, you can, if you want, you can't sand it, but you're going to virtually take all of this away. You're going to have virtually none of this surface showing. So I usually don't. Now, the next step is I want to be able, well, just to make sure. All right, so that's a 1/2 inch. There's not very much wiggle room there. So now I want to be able to make sure each one of these is the same. So I just make myself a little reference template, all right? It's from this edge to here for the long one. There's actually a mark in here from here to here for short ones. So I'll just hold that up there. And actually for this I use sometimes on this last one I don't. Sometimes I use just a skew. But normally I'll use a rough and gouge. And then I'll take my bigger skew. And I do that because I like a bigger skew with that, with the bevel being a little bit longer here. I can maintain a contact more all the way down this slope, okay? And then I'll come back and I'll make a reference mark. And I'll cut my tenon. Now this tenon is the most critical piece. If you make it too big, it won't fit in the hub. You make it too loose, you gotta glue it and hold it and all that junk. So I am using, oh, I just made it too small. So here I'm telling you have to be really careful. Oh no, it's all right. Tell you what, it looks like that moved in transit. So what I'm going to do is set this caliper against the shaft of the drill bit. So this is a, I said 7/32 drill bit. I liked it better than 1/4 inch was just too big for this. So yeah, that's way small. Anyway, you get the idea. I'm back in here, and now I got to turn the back part of the spike. That's the one cut. You know, it takes a little practice. But I will say that it's a really good cut to learn. Especially if you're making beads and stuff like that. Being able to make that cut with a skew is, you can do it with a gouge, you can do it with a spindle gouge, that's fine, but I just like it with how easy it is. If I'm sitting here cranking these out, you can see I'm making a pretty short hub, tenon. And then I cut off the little nub that's left, and I go on to the next one. And this one, if I've left a little, not this little dinky thing, But if it's sticking out here a little bit, that's where I measure from. Okay. I can get a little more aggressive now because it's being supported better. Now, one thing you have to remember, if you're doing 8, you do 7 of them like I just did. One of them you have to make for the hanger. All right? So what I do with that one, now, you know what? I'm wrong. I really need it. In my reading classes, I can see it. So I just made a little divot, and now take my little dental tool, just poke that in, and that's where the screw eye is screwing. All right, so now I'm back to where I was. Let me mark this. Let me do a better job with this pen. Yep. If you notice the grip, this really helps to make this cut. And for any of you that have been with me learning something, you'll notice that I always am using this grip when I'm doing skew work or even spindle work, gouge work. My finger is under the tool rest. My thumb is on the top. My 3 fingers wrap the bottom of the skew. My thumb is a stop to keep it from going this way. My fingers keep it from going that way. So now I can get myself a really nice controlled cut on this surface. So if I maybe want to do one more final check, well, that's fine. So now I'm going to make that small pen. Cut off the nub, and I'm going to do one more. Alright, so there I'm ready to go. And that'll fit in there fine. Now, this is pretty far back in here. I don't have enough room, enough real estate. So, if I'm careful when I take this out, I can loosen it and pull it out. I wasn't. It's a little more than I want it to. You don't have to get it exactly. because again, the top of that, most of it's going to be turned away.
All of a sudden, turn with that interest.
Yeah. So, you know, all this gets turned off. This is all going to be turned into that part of that spike. I might decide to come down to a little farther on this thing. All right, so I'm going to take this time I'm going to take my paper here and mark it the other direction. I'll part this off. And now I'll go ahead and I'm picking a spot. You can't really tell, but most of them are about the same. And if I wanted to, I could make a mark on here that says I want to start the spike about here. You know, I could make that mark. And so I would always start in the same place. But it's not too hard to see where on this I need to start to get a nice shape of spike. Alright, and again, I could do this all with my smaller scoop. That would be alright. But since I have to use two. Now, if I wanted it to stick through the hub into the center and then drill it out and stuff, I'd have to make one, you know, that long. That's a good one. So you can see that if you do a fair number of these, the process gets simpler and simpler. You know, you get that muscle memory going, and it's, oh yeah, that's sweet, and it works once you get it. And since they're all the same diameter, I'll cut this off long. Okay. So there I am with a long spike. I've done a number of shorter spikes. It's fine up where I measured it, and it's a little big past that. There we go. So this is what I was talking about, where you make it long enough for them to go through. I'd remount this and then re-drill it with this bit. All right, and let's try it. I don't know if it'll work, but I wouldn't normally have taken it off the lathe, but since I had to do this other stuff. One of the other things I do is, on something that's this size, I could use a regular chuck. And so I have about 4 or 5 chucks. So if I've got something here that I want to be able to remount, it stays on the chuck. I never take it off. If I am going to take it off, I generally mark where's the number 1 jaws at. So theoretically, I can get it back here. Let's slow this down a bit.
So they glued in?
They are not. Out of the line of fire. Yes, normally I would have glued them in first.
Safety talk.
Somebody got the camera rolling?
So there is, so can you see that
Yeah, I do see it.
in there? So that's kind of an interesting effect as well, all right? Where I've got the, you're going to have a series of cherry dots on a maple hub, or this a holly hub, all right?
Save some measuring.
Yeah. And so, but I have to make longer tenons where all the tenons are really the right size and all that stuff. I normally, when I did the urchin bowl, all those tenons were 1/4 inch. And you can get a 1/4 inch wrench like this, all right? So that's how I did all the tenon sizing. But this is 7/32. You don't find a wrench like this in 7/32 without special order. So,
And how many spikes did you have on that urchin bowl?
1,000. So there is muscle memory involved, you know, I'm not kidding. It was the same move over and over again. I did them in batches of 72 because that's how many clothespins I had to hold them up to paint them. Now, one of the things that I'll do one more, here's one thing I wanted to talk about. Here's a solid hub, all right? So pretty straightforward. Did it the same thing, didn't drill anything out, went ahead and just put some decoration on this side. How do I deal with this side? You know? I could put it in here, but and it may not be a problem, but it's going to leave grooves from the jaws in here. And you know, if you put tape around it and all that stuff, you're not going to mount it on there straight. And so when I thought about it, I said, maybe a solid hub. It would give me better chance of drilling it without it breaking, but having that jam chuck to be able to turn that hub around and sand the other side made a lot of sense. So that's when I went to drill it before I take out the center of the hub, because it doesn't really split that way. All right, but then there's a number of other things that I'll do one more thing here. I'll put one together for you, and then I'll do one more thing. And that's see if I can, jeez, they're on the fly. So
Looks like the hub from the Tinker Toys.
yep.
You know, that's what I was thinking. I wonder if this is how they did
Yes.
Tinker Toys.
That's old.
You just use Tinker Toys.
So this one I'm going to do a little different. Whoa. Dang. You know, once they're sanded up, one thing I need to remember to do is to glue on the one for the hanger. And then the last thing I want to show you, yeah, I'll use this. Yeah, I'll use this. All right, so let's say I have this one and I want to make a hubcap for this. So I know that it's got to be bigger than that. That's going to be my tenon that has to go in there. But I want to make, I'll do that later. First one I want to do is turn it to the right diameter. So I want to make it bigger than the hole, but I don't want to make it so big that it goes out to the edge or past the edge. So, in fact, I'll do two treatments here for you. This will be one. All right. So I'm going to make the hub, whatever it is, a little over 3/16, and that's where the tenon is going to be for that. So let me measure the tenon. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to take just a hair more. Okay. Okay. Oh yeah, this is normally where I would have used my spindle gouge. Now let's see if I can do this. Yeah. So that's point down. You know, you got less of a chance of a catch when you do that. Now, you could use a spiraling tool or a knurling tool. I think I brought a knurling tool. Now for this, I normally like to do it, maybe 500 RPM or something like that. Okay. So there's a nice little design. And now I want to do one outline. So a little point tool. All right. And now the trick, of course, is making the other side to match this one. So I'm probably not going to do that, because you get the idea. So I don't need much to hang on to, all right? So I use my 1/8 inch parting tool to make that part, and then I'm going to use my 1/16 inch to part it off. And if things are correct, that just fits on there, and you just glue that on there. And now you have a way to hide anything inside. It's, there's air in here, so it's lighter than if you would have made that a solid piece, okay? So that's one thing, and then I'll do one more and then we're done. So again, this is the inside diameter here. Pretty close. So now you take your hub, here, good, and just take off a little more of this tail end. Just a little more. Okay, so now I want to mark on this other side. And now I didn't bring another smaller drill bit. But what I do now is all I would do is drill this out. I'd leave maybe 1/8 of an inch wall. All right. Drill that out. And then part it off. Then I've got that one, like that one that like this one, where I've got the inner hub extending past the outer hub, and again, it hides anything inside and it leaves airspace. So again, you've done the maximum amount of lightening. I didn't sand these after, and I didn't, you know, spray them up more than just once. So, but
What did you, is that just with can spray?
Ye-
Your red and your greens?
no, the red and the green I airbrushed.
Oh, okay.
I used iridescent green and iridescent red. No, not iridescent. I used metallic green and metallic red. And I like the metallics. I'm not sure I would do I'm not sure I like the silver in here, but you know, you can play with all kinds of color, and you could, you know, you can draw out one of these, even if you use stylized things, make a couple of copies and then try all kinds of different combinations and different spike sizes and different wood types or whatever. So the concept is very, very flexible, you know. So that's it. Something to try.
Thank you.
All right.